city council members, to our mayor in his absence, to our city treasurer, our city attorney, our chief of staff. Today is Monday, April 13, 2026, and this is the City of Romulus City Council Special Meeting Study Session. This meeting is to discuss the quarterly investment report. At this time, we will have roll call. Councilwoman Abdo.
Here.
Councilman Bullock.
He's excused.
So noted. Councilman Jones.
Here.
Councilwoman Roscoe.
Here.
Councilwoman Talley.
Here.
Councilman Wadsworth.
Here.
And Councilman Wilhite.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum for tonight's special meeting.
Here.
Tonight's special meeting agenda is as follows. Number 1, roll call. Number 2, agenda. Number 3, discussion, the quarterly investment report. Number 4 is public comment. And number 5 is adjournment. And a motion will be in order to accept tonight's special meeting agenda as presented.
So moved to accept the agenda as presented. Support.
Been motion by Ms. Roscoe, seconded by Ms. Abdo for the approval of the special meeting agenda. Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Ms. Abdo?
Yes.
Mr. Wilhite?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion approved.
Thank you, City Council. We are now in discussion, and to lead out our discussion is our City Treasurer, Stacy Page.
Thank you, and good evening, and thank you all for being here at 5:30. This time, I would like to introduce Gray Leslie. I believe all of you have met her, and she's going to provide the investment performance review for the quarter ending December 31st, 2025. And as a reminder, she was due to present it in February, but we had other things going on, so we postponed it until today. So thank you for your patience and willing to reschedule. So, and you can go ahead and have the floor.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, fantastic. Nice to see all of you. Hope you're all doing well. And I believe I have not met you yet, so I can introduce myself later. But I've been with PFM Asset Management for about 11 years now. I'm a managing director. I'm in Grand Rapids, but I cover the entire state of Michigan. Prior to that, I worked with our largest clients across the country. So we had people from all over, from California, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, et cetera. So I've been working with you and with your portfolio for about 2 years now. Can't believe it's already been 2 years. So anyway, so just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land, for those of you who don't remember, you're invested in fixed income. That means bonds, not any sort of stocks or equities of any sort, or alternatives, anything like that. When we get to the actual portfolio construction, I'll show you what we're invested in. All of it is within Public Act 20, which is what governs your own investment policy, which we're also following. But before I get to that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the market. Of course, you're welcome to look at all of these pages. I'm going to focus on just a few here. When I was thinking about how I wanted to kind of frame tonight, I wanted to talk mainly about the Fed's dual mandate. So the Fed sets where we have interest rates overnight. And then from there, we see interest rates fluctuate up and down, but overnight rates are really anchored to the Fed's policy. So the Fed had cut rates a number of times last quarter. They had actually cut rates in December, and then we have seen them hold rates where they are since then. And the reason that that's important is because it gives us a sense as to what we're expecting going forward. So what the Fed has done is essentially cut rates down because the job market was showing quite a bit of cooling during the last few quarters and even into this most recent reading. The other part of their dual mandate is inflation. And so they have to really manage, are we going to support the job market, or are we going to make sure inflation doesn't get out of control? And sometimes they're able to do both of those things at the same time. Sometimes those are in conflict with each other. And unfortunately, right now, we're in a position where those are in conflict. So on this page here, I'm showing the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index. It's really the inflation numbers that we look at on a regular basis, although it is not the Fed's preferred metric. But you can see what we have here from November, which is obviously quite a ways away from where we are today. So if I were to bring this closer to where we are as of last Friday, we got the most recent CPI numbers. The dark blue line, which is overall Consumer Price Index, and I'm on page 5, the overall Consumer Price Index is now at 3.3%. So what that means is, versus where we were at this time last year, overall prices are about 3.3% higher than they were at that time last year. If you look at core CPI, which is shown here at 2.6% in light blue, it's at 3% now. No, it's not. It's at, I think it's at 2.6% again. Still at 2.6%. Now, why is there such a big divergence between the 3.3% and the 2.6% of these similar metrics, right? The reasoning is because when you look at the overall number, the dark blue line, that includes food and energy prices. Now, what have we seen increase recently? Energy prices, right? We've seen a big increase from energy because of the conflict that we're seeing in Iran right now, and the Strait of Hormuz being closed, and not having the passage of those ships carrying not only energy items, but also fertilizer, things of that nature as well.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, it's okay. So all of that to say, what that has meant is that we've actually seen on a month-over-month basis, not year-over-year, but month-over-month, the increase in prices on a month-over-month basis has now been 0.9%, so almost 1% change in overall prices of all the goods and services that we pay for on a regular basis, just from March to April. So it's quite a bit of a change, and again, that's really because of what we've been seeing with the Strait of Hormuz and the concerns there. So as a result, we're seeing energy prices higher. As I mentioned, we're seeing fertilizer prices higher. With fertilizer prices going higher, that means that we're also gonna see food prices continue to increase. With energy prices being higher, not only is that affecting us at the pump, but it's also affecting jet fuel costs. And so if anyone's transporting somewhere, right? If anyone's traveling, then you're also seeing higher prices overall with your tickets going from one place to another via an airplane. So it's really, it's not just one slice of life, right? This is affecting and is going to continue to affect a whole broad spectrum of things. Any questions there before I continue on? Okay. So the second part of the Fed's dual mandate, as I mentioned, is keeping the labor market steady and in a good and healthy place. Not too long ago, the overall unemployment rate was near 3.4%, which is extremely low. It's the record low that we've ever seen, and that was in 2022, 2021, in that frame of reference. Now, where are we now? You can see that since 2022, we've seen the unemployment rate on the right-hand side of this page continually increase. We're about 4.5% right now as well. Now, what that 4.5% means is really not a terrible thing, right? We're 1% off of where we were on the lows, but if you look at it on a historical basis, we're still well below where we've been for the past 25 and 50 years. So being at anywhere below 5% is still considered full employment. Now, the reason the Fed has still reacted to this and still cut rates is because the Fed does not want this to get out of control. They don't want to see a huge slowing or a huge cooling in the labor market and then see inflation also continue to increase, right? So they want to support the labor market as much as possible by keeping rates a little bit lower than they had been previously. What we're showing on the left-hand side is how many jobs have been added to the economy on a month-over-month basis. The revisions that were done to all of 2025 numbers ended up meaning that there was very little to no growth in terms of overall jobs on a month-over-month basis for 2025. The huge amount that you see that's negative there in yellow is from deferred government resignations as part of DOGE, right? And that didn't come in effect, or that didn't pull into the numbers until really October of last year. So that's what we're continuing to look at, is how many jobs are being added. We were in a position where you may recall where people were able to switch jobs, get a lot more money for switching jobs. Jobs were plentiful. There were 2 jobs available for every 1 person looking for work. We're now more at a 1-to-1. So there's 1 job available for every 1 person looking for work. So if I could magically, geographically, and technically kind of snap my fingers and have everyone lined up, there would be no unemployment, right? But we know that that's not the case. There's often mismatches in experience, mismatches in technical backgrounds, all of those types of things. So as a result, we're still seeing cooling in this space. That is why the Fed had continued to cut rates. They are on pause now because they're concerned about what's happening with inflation. So they don't want to lower rates further, have inflation get out of control, right? And then be in a position where they have to claw back higher rates in order to get inflation back down. The last thing I'll talk about in this section is really something that sounds technical, called the K-shaped economy. Really, it's not that technical. It's really when you see two different parts of the economy moving divergently or moving differently from each other. What do I mean by that? I mean that the lowest quartile of income earners here in the US is paying a whole lot less overall than the overall amount for highest quartile earners. So what do I mean by that? If you look at the left-hand side, you can see personal consumption, which is in blue. That's you and me going out and spending money. So we've all been spending a lot more money over the past few years because of inflation, right? When you look at overall spending and wage growth, you can see that the lowest quartile of earners are really struggling in comparison to the largest quartile or the highest quartile. So when you see overall personal consumption in dark blue over there on the left continuing to be pretty steady, that seems good, right? When we think about how the US economy grows, it's by you and me going out and spending money. But the people that are really bolstering that right now, that are spending the most amount of money, are the highest quartile of earners because they're able to. The lowest quartile of earners is unable to and is struggling. So we're in a position right now where we're seeing a divergence between these two groups of people, where we're seeing, the bolstering up and the buoying of the economy happening from the highest quartile of earners. Part of the reason for that is what's shown on the right-hand side, that's wage growth by quartile. The highest quartile, you can see wages are continuing to grow slightly or at least move across, at a steady pace, whereas the lowest quartile of earners, their wages are going down right now, or not increasing as quickly. The reverse obviously was the case during COVID because so many people were needed for those leisure and hospitality jobs, those necessary jobs that were really required to continue to move the economy along. So they had a larger increase in wage growth during that period of time, and now we're seeing the opposite be the case. There's a lot more in here, as usual, but I'm going to skip over to the actual portfolio itself and show you what's going on there and why we are invested the way that we are. Were there any other questions before I talk about the portfolio? Okay. On this page, we have a consolidated summary of all of the different accounts that PFM Asset Management manages. So there's one portfolio that we manage, and it's called a MyLaugh managed account, and it's invested partially in GovMIC. GovMIC is a local government investment pool that's here in the state of Michigan that follows Public Act 20 that state and local governments can specifically invest in. The managed account is actually managed by one of our portfolio managers out in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Our Harrisburg, Pennsylvania office is where we have all of our portfolio managers, our entire desk with all the Bloombergs and all the stuff going on. And they manage a bevy of Michigan-related clients. So this is someone who's very familiar with Michigan code, with the state statutes, et cetera. So on the right-hand side here, you can see the sector allocation. The vast majority of the portfolio is invested in U.S. Treasuries. These are considered the safest, most liquid type of investment out there currently. They are AA rated. I think I've talked about this in the past. They are AA rated, not AAA rated, because the U.S. government has been downgraded by many of the rating agencies. That's really as a result of the amount of debt that the U.S. government currently holds and the considered ability to actually pay back that debt. Now, if we look at the next biggest section, that's agency CMBS. I just want to break that down really quick. Agency means it's a federal agency, so think Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac mostly. Freddie Mac backed CMBS, so commercial mortgage-backed securities. So it's a pool of mortgages that goes together, typically apartment housing, multi-family housing, things of that nature, that is backed by a federal agency of the United States government. And then those securities get sold to different investors. So they're sold to you, and you hold quite a bit in your portfolio, currently about 20%. The reason we find these attractive is because they offer a higher yield over treasuries, but they also offer pretty good stability. And in addition, there's less risk than a typical mortgage-backed security because it is backed by an agency of the U.S. government. So it's not explicitly backed by the U.S. government, but it is implicitly backed by the U.S. government. The rest of this is all similarly backed by either the U.S. government or backed by governments, including the U.S., which is what I'm talking about with supranationals. The difference is with commercial paper, that's at 7%, that's in yellow. That is short-term corporate debt. So think of Toyota, or think of Morgan Stanley, or something like that, a name that we all have heard of, issuing debt to, just for the next few months, right? From anywhere from 0 to 9 months here in the state of Michigan. That usually is issued at a premium that you would get versus what you would get if you were just buying a treasury, because it's considered riskier, right? It's considered riskier, but we have an entire credit team that looks at those types of things and makes sure that we are comfortable purchasing each of those names in the portfolio, and make sure that we think that they will be able to continue to pay their debt off when it comes due and matures in the portfolio. Any questions on sectors? I know that was a lot all at once.
When when were we downgraded again? When did that take place?
When did it take place? So I'm thinking, because here, I'm just gonna go to the actual credit quality distribution. You can see it here on this page in the bottom left. It was downgraded, the US government was downgraded in 2011 originally, and then in 2021, I believe, second, and then 2024. So those are the three main rating agencies.
Okay.
So the last time it was downgraded was by S&P, Standard & Poor's, and it was downgraded from AAA to AA+. So it's still very high credit quality, but just not as high as it had been previously. So you might be asking, well, what is actually rated AAA in the portfolio then? How does that work? What's better than the US government credit, right? It's actually a supranational. What a supranational is a bunch of different governments coming together, including the US government, to back some sort of aid project. So one of the names that you probably have heard of is the World Bank. World Bank is a great example. That is backed not only by the US government, but several from Europe, et cetera, and because it has the backing of all of those different governments, it's considered AAA and not just AA+.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'm going to go back a few pages just to make sure I cover this information here, but then I'll continue. So you might be asking, well, what's the difference here? Why are we seeing 116.7 million? That's because this includes everything that you're invested in. There are some securities held outside of the PFM asset management portfolio. There's also quite a bit in Michigan Class, which is another local government investment pool. And so you can see that overall spread, especially under 6 months, is quite a large amount, and that's because of those things that I just mentioned. You can see that split out by type here on this page. Again, other money market fund there is that large portion of 34 million at the time of 12/31/25. And then you continue down, you also see quite a bit in federal agency notes. Those are the securities that are held outside of our portfolio by the city. Here is credit quality. I know we talked a little bit about this with relation to our portfolio that we manage, but you can see across the board what are all of the other areas that are managed or held by the city in terms of credit quality. So you can see Huntington National Bank, Comerica, all of those things are also shown with credit qualities as well. Any questions on that before I continue? Okay. So for our portfolio, again, about 38 million or so in the portfolio as of 12/31. The benchmark duration is 2.02 years. That essentially says where is the benchmark stationed in this 0 to 5 year space, which is where we're investing on your behalf. And the average duration of the securities in the benchmark is 2.02 years. Our portfolio is slightly longer at 2.09 years, and that's on purpose. That was to take advantage of the fact that we were seeing interest rates fall over the past few quarters, right? We've seen the Fed continue to cut rates in September and then December. We wanted to take advantage of that. When interest rates fall, market values go up. So if we had longer duration in the portfolio, that was even more beneficial for your portfolio than it would have been had we just been aligned exactly with the benchmark. So that was on purpose. That's what's going on there. Sector allocation, you can see again at the top right there, we went through all of that. And then duration distribution, you can see at the bottom. Again, we have quite a bit in the 0 to 1 year bucket, but then less than the benchmark if you look at the blue bar versus the gray bar being the benchmark. You can see that there's less in that 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 year space than the benchmark has, whereas we are actually overweight in the 3 to 5 year space. Again, trying to pick up some of that longer term yield as interest rates have been falling. This page shows on a quarter-over-quarter basis what has been happening with the different types of sectors and where we've seen movement. What I mean by that is if you look from September percentages to December percentages on the right-hand side of the page, you can see that in federal CMBS, there was 7.0 million at 18.9% of the portfolio as of September. That's now at 7.3 million, 19.5%. So there's a little bit of an increase there. It's not a huge increase, but that means that we bought a little bit or had a little bit of valuation go up in agency CMBS. And that was also on purpose. So we've seen quite a bit of value in those securities, especially over the last quarter. So we've continued to add to that sector. You can see that on this page, as I talked about. Anything in blue is where we added, and anything in gray is where there were maturities or sales out of the securities. So we saw quite a bit of maturities and sales out of treasuries, but quite a bit of adds in treasuries, and then we saw on a net basis, we were net adders, net buyers in agency commercial mortgage-backed securities as well. So here's the fun stuff, portfolio performance over the last 10 years, including the most recent quarter, ended 12/31. So for the past 3 months at this point, we had about $330,000 in interest earned, so those are coupons that are actively coming into the portfolio. The change in market value is based on where interest rates move. So I don't control that, you don't control that, no one controls that. That's unless you talk about the entire market controlling it. So based on what we saw over the past quarter, interest rates had gone down. That was beneficial for overall performance. So in terms of total dollar return on this for this quarter, you can see it's about $420,000. That equates to an actual total return percentage of 1.11 versus the benchmark of 1.10. If we go back over the past year, though, I really want to focus on this for a second. $2 million in total dollar returns on this portfolio. The benchmark returned to 544. We returned to 561. So that's outperformance of 16 basis points on an average annual basis just for the past year. And then all the way on the right-hand side there, over the past 10 years, a 218 versus a 2%. I want to kind of explain why interest rates and returns have been lower over that period of time than what we've seen over the past year. Think about what happened during COVID. The Fed cut rates from 1.5 to 1.75% down to 0. So interest rates were basically 0 for many years. And then the Fed was trying to fight inflation, so they raised interest rates really high. Well, what we've seen over the past few years here now into the 3-year bucket has been, really benefiting, the portfolio benefiting from that higher interest rate environment. And that's why we're seeing, near 5%, over 5% returns over those periods of time. Whereas if we go back 10 years, there was a long period of time where interest rates were quite low. And that's why you're seeing that be a lower interest rate overall. That's just what has happened, unfortunately, in the markets at that time. So we're still excited that we've been able to outperform by that much over that period of time. Hope you are as well, but I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of context there. And then the last thing for me is the accrual basis earnings page. We talked about total return earnings. This is accrual basis, so if anyone's accountants or interested in accounting, maybe this page will be a little bit more interesting to you. So that interest earned amount is still the exact same because, again, those are the coupons coming into the portfolio. The change in amortized cost is just what happens over time, right? As portfolio ages over time, securities age over time, they typically accrue up higher. So you can see that there's been a huge upswing really since 2023 or the end of 2023 into 2025. That's because interest rates have continued to be higher. We've gotten rid of lower yielding securities and purchased these higher yielding securities that still are in the portfolio today. All right, any questions for me?
Any questions from council? No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's no more discussion from council, number 4 is public comment, and this is the portion of the agenda for those in the audience who would like to address the city council regarding tonight's special meeting agenda.
Any questions? Close it out.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Number 5 is adjournment. The time is 5:57.
So moved.
Support.
The motion by Mr. Wadsworth, seconded by Ms. Roscoe for the adjournment of this special meeting. Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Wilhite?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Abdo?
Yes.
Mr. Bullock?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, we are adjourned. Thank you. Next meeting, 6 o'clock?
That's correct.
Okay.